Hello and welcome to Everybody Has a Story with Jeff Seltzer. I am your host, Jeff Seltzer. Every week I interview somebody about their interests, their life stories, whatever they've experienced. I'm trying to learn about as much about people as I can, hear their stories, and maybe share a few of mine along the way as well. If you're new to the pod, thank you so much for giving it a shot and checking it out. I think you'll have a lot of fun in this journey with me. If you listen or watch every week, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate a lot of great interactions I've had on Instagram. Just continue to reach out as you have, which is absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely love it. What I do want to say is this is the 8th episode. So we've been basically, this is we started mid-July. This is the 8th episode, lots of different topics, lots of great engagement and such like that. This has just been really, really an adventure for me, right? Like going into it, I gave myself 18 months to start a podcast. I did it in about 2 months, which was just insane. Met a lot of people along the way. I've learned a lot about podcasting, a lot about people. It's just been so much fun. So again, thank you so much for joining and really, really appreciate it. Before I introduce my first guest for this week, or my only guest for this week, I wanted to go over some housekeeping. Firstly, if you want to reach us or find us at Instagram, you can find us at Everybody Has a Story Pod. You can feel free to DM me if you want to be a future guest, if you have any notes, questions, comments, want to shout out, whatever. You can check us out on YouTube at Everybody Has a Story Pod. My personal Instagram is at Seltzer77. If you want to email us for whatever reason, if you want to be an advertiser, do whatever you want to do, email me at everybodyhasastorypod@gmail.com. Or for all things Jeff Seltzer, you can always check out jeffseltzer.com. Lots of really cool stuff there. Reminder, we are on all podcast platforms that I'm aware of. So we're on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, Amazon. Anywhere you can find a podcast, you could probably find us there. So again, thank you all for continuing. And I'm really, really excited about what we've done so far and what's to come. With that said, I'm going to introduce my guest for this week, Litthya Baez. Litthya, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hello. Well, I'm so excited about this. Thanks for
having me.
It's pretty
exciting, right? Well, yeah. Thanks for coming. So I'll give Litthya an opportunity in a moment to give some background on herself, but wanted to say that I think Lithya's an amazing person. I met her, I want to say roughly 4.5 years ago or so at work. Since then, we've become friends. Our daughters go to school together, which is pretty cool. So it's one of those things where you never know, who you're going to connect with or how you're going to find people. So it's just been an honor and a privilege to meet you, Litthya. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jeff.
Awesome. So with that said, Litthya, can you give us a little background on yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I'm originally from Venezuela. Funny story, people think Minnesota. Sometimes when I say Venezuela, I'm like, have you seen me or heard me? But in any event, originally from Venezuela, American now, single mom of 2 amazing kids. And yeah, have a full-time job and sing at my church. I love singing, dancing, all that stuff. So, and I also love sharing my story because I believe it can encourage other people. So that's why I said, yeah, Jeff, I'll be on your podcast.
Awesome, Litthya. Well, again, thanks for coming on. And just a little background for everybody else as well. So I've known a little bit about Lithya's background story, but not like a lot about it. So I know Litthya immigrated to the United States. She's originally from Venezuela, which for me just intrigued me because for me, I've spent 90+% of my life living in New Jersey. I was born in New York, lived in Chicago for about a minute and a half. Moved to Jersey when I was like 5, went to college in Jersey. I've moved up and down North and South Jersey or whatever, but for the most part, never really left the state professionally, personally, or whatever, for my real life. So for me, it's intriguing to me for someone to make that kind of a life decision and that kind of move. So that was one piece of it. Additionally, I found Litthya was on another podcast a few years ago, and I guess maybe I had a little podcast envy. So off of that, I was like, wow, this is a pretty cool story. Maybe I can get her to share her stories on my podcast as well. I'm sure a different audience, different types of people, whatever. So again, Litthya, obviously, welcome to the show. Wanted to see if you can talk a little bit about, I guess, coming to the United States, growing up. Maybe let's start off with growing up in Venezuela, right? So I know you moved to the United States in 2005, and we don't have to date ourselves or age ourselves here. But can you tell a little bit about living and growing up in another country and kind of what led you to coming here?
Definitely. Well, so I moved in 2005, which means I moved here when I was 2 years old. Nah.
Obviously.
So I don't remember anything. So Venezuela was a fantastic country, great culture. My family, it was very, close knit. My 2 parents remained, married until the end when my mom passed. And, family values. Obviously, what you hear, the stereotypical things you hear about Latinos is exactly what my childhood was. We would travel. The difference is my family was out of town, so we needed to travel to see them every year or twice per year. From my mom's side, I was closer with my dad's side of the family, but really close with my family and friends. Interestingly enough, if I had, say, I had 10 friends, 7 out of them are living in a different country now due to the situation right now. This is not about politics, and I don't want to weigh the whole stuff down. But yeah, the country where I grew up was very different. It was very, strong, and it really was a blessing to be, born there and raised there. I learned a lot about, friendships and resilience and like winging it, which is part of the culture that I bring to my day to day. Like, okay, it's going to be fine. We'll find ways to do it. It's not always, this is the way that we've always done it. So I think that part of my culture is something that I cherish. It has, helped me grow in every aspect of my life here in the US. So.
Got it. Great to know. So thank you again for sharing. So again, you moved to the United States in like 2005, I think you had said. But before
Yeah.
going into that, so I assume you're a native Spanish speaker. Is that correct?
Yes, sí, señora, sí, señora. And
Got
you know what? My sisters will kill me if I don't mention them. I have 2 sisters. I'm very close with them.
Of course.
They're currently living in Mexico. So yeah.
Awesome. Shout out to Lithya's sister. It's great. Hey there. Okay, so you grew up speaking Spanish. At what point did you start learning English? Was that after you came to the United States in 2005? Or did you learn English in school? And again, for me, I'll say this, like I speak English natively, not well, but this is my language. I took 3 years of high school Spanish. Again, I can read some things, I can translate some things, but for the most part, I mean, it was 3 years of high school Spanish. So for me, the idea of being bilingual or trilingual or whatever else like that just scares the heck out of me. Because again, I've got trouble with this language, trying to, go to a different language or whatever else like that. It seems like it's a lot. So like for you, when did you start speaking English? Was it after you came over? Was it back at home? Kind of like, take me through that journey.
Yeah, it was back home. So this is going to date the heck out of me. All right.
Go for
it. My dad got me. Sorry, I'm laughing.
It's okay.
He got me a series of cassettes. Thank you very much. Cassettes with with an English course and whatever. I was probably in 6th grade or something. So I started listening to the thing. It was, British English, but that was when my desire to learn the language started. I learned a few things. Obviously, that didn't make me bilingual, like any of those tools. No matter what they tell you guys, they're not gonna make you bilingual. So this podcast is sponsored by
Duolingo. Yes,
exactly.
Obviously.
So by the owl. So yeah. So that's how it started. Then the little English that you learn in high school. In the church that I was going to, we had visitors constantly that came from the U.S. So I was like, "Ooh, I'm gonna practice, right?" And then I would watch media, listen to radio, or whatever music in English. So I really had a passion to learn, and I think it's also an age thing because I tried as an adult when I was pregnant with my first daughter. I tried to learn French, and for the life of me, I did not learn anything. Like my brain was like, "What? What are you talking about?" It's like Joy in Friends when he starts going blah 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 blah. Blah. That was me. I was like, "What are you saying?" So I think age had a component there, right? And also using it constantly helped because as I started working, I started as an administrative assistant ages ago, and bilingual, which you don't need a lot, but you start practicing, right? And you are in calls with headquarters or vendors or whatever. So that's pretty much how I learned that. Obviously, when I moved to the United States, for me, America is the whole thing. When I moved here, that's when I really feel like I started being fully bilingual. I thought I was until I discovered that I wasn't.
So it finally clicked when you came to the United States. Is that what you're saying? So basically,
Yeah,
like, you kind of learned it, but you don't fully like live into it until you're kind of forced to, right?
correct. Until you have, well, okay, caveat there, big
Yes.
caveat.
Sure.
I moved to Florida, South
Okay.
Florida. So I really didn't need to speak English on a daily basis. When I
Okay.
moved to New Jersey, my ex-sister-in-law, who is a great friend of mine now, she told me, "Welcome to real America," because where you were living is not America. And it is true. I would eat empanadas for breakfast or arepas for, dinner. And you didn't really need to speak English, but it does force you to have daily conversations in the language, right? So say I
Yeah.
was at the 70% level, that put me on a 90% level very quickly because you have to use the language, right? So
Of course. So we'll get a little bit more into your journey in a second, but I did have one more question about language. So I've always wondered. So you obviously grew up speaking Spanish. You eventually started learning English. When you talk to somebody, or when you see something or hear something, do you translate it? So, for example, if someone's talking to you, do you in your mind kind of like think about what they're saying, translate it back and forth, and kind of respond, or how does your mind process it since you do have multiple languages, in that head of yours?
this is super fun because I've had that question asked, and I had a coworker, my first job, who said, "You know that you're bilingual when you start dreaming in the language." And
Mm,
number one, and number two, when you have a full-on fight with someone, an argument with someone
right.
in English. So he's like, "That's how I discovered I was bilingual." So every time I, have a heated discussion with someone, I'm like, "Okay, I'm bilingual," right? So I think your brain, with practice, starts kind of processing information in that language. So you don't have to translate. When you're learning, there's a lot of internal translation that goes on. I think this show, Modern Family.
Yes.
I forgot her name.
Sophia.
Sophia Vergara. Her
Yeah.
her character said, "You don't know how difficult it is to speak the language. Do you know how smart I am in Spanish?" So at the beginning, when you're learning, you do translate, right? But there's a point in which it's natural. You even dream in the language. You even have arguments with people in the language. And the other component that is super important is um, business versus daily conversation, right?
Okay.
So I find myself in business meetings with Latinos, and we have to switch to Spanish.
Okay.
Sorry, to English,
Yes.
because we're like, "Oh, how do you say market share?" Oh, so it's like, you know what? So I speak business in Spanish. I'm sorry. Oh my gosh, in English, and in my home, with especially my oldest daughter who is more fluent, I tend to switch a lot to Spanish because it's easier to
Got it.
say, dinner and whatever is served. And sometimes there are words that I do not remember in any language. So I ask vendors, "What do you call that thing that goes with the thing?"
Right.
"You
Right.
mean the chair, mom?" Yeah, exactly that.
Got it. Got it. So super helpful. And again, I'm sure everybody probably is wired differently, thinks differently.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, do you generally dream in English or Spanish at this point? If that's not too personal to ask.
I don't know that I would need to pay more attention to that, but I think if I am in my dream with my family,
Yes.
yeah, it will be a Spanish dream.
Okay.
If
Very good.
I'm in the dream with people from church or work or friends or whatever that I have met here, it's usually English. And I don't know what, because I have had dreams, and I'm pretty sure everybody has had those, where you have a mix of people that you have known through your life.
Yep.
I will have to get back to you on that one on the
That's
next episode.
That's fair. We'll do a part two, or we'll do a follow up. That works. Cool. So
Yeah.
you immigrated to the U.S. In 2005. You went from Venezuela to Florida. Was that for work? Was that for family? What pulled you to the States at that point? Like, obviously, it's
Yeah.
a huge life changing decision. Like, what pulled you here?
It really is a life-changing decision. And if you add to that my mom had passed 3 months before I moved to this country,
Mm,
I came here kicking and screaming. The father of my daughters had found an opportunity
Okay.
here, relocation through his company. And I did not want to come here. I'm like, my family needs me. I don't want to go. I really don't want to go. But we ended up coming here. And I'm so thankful that I ended up here, right? Because now, my daughters were born here and, they're safe. And, given the situation that my people are going through right now, I'm really thankful that I'm here. And there's also a way for me to help and, stay in touch with my roots. But at the same time, I'm really thankful. So I didn't have a job when I moved here.
Okay.
He had a job, I didn't. So I had to start over. So that was rough, but not rough 2024 rough. It was more like 2005 rough, which is I was looking for a job for 3 months,
Right. Yep.
Which felt like 3 years, but it was interesting because I would go on interviews or like phone, how they do the first kind of let me see if this person is worth talking to kind of phone call. And I would hear a lot of, hey, you don't have US experience. And I'm thinking, well, people buy things in Venezuela too.
Right.
It's like, I don't understand, right? So I'm really thankful to my friend Sherry, who gave me the opportunity to get my first job here in the US. She saw my potential and hired me despite not having any US experience. So that's when my career started. But the beginning was tough.
Did you have any issues with, I assume you went to college in Venezuela. Would that be correct?
I did.
Did you have any issues with, companies in the United States not accepting the college credits or the transcript, or basically did most of them look at it and say, yep, it's a college degree, so she's all set?
I think it's more, she has a college degree, she has the fourth level study and whatever, so she's fine. However, some companies were back then a little bit more picky about, it's not a US based institution. But now that I know the quality of education that our kids get here and the quality of education that we get back in Latin America, I can tell you that those degrees are as, hear this professional talk, as good. They're as good as the degrees that you see here in the best universities. So, but I think in my area of work, if I was like a lawyer or something, that would have played a bigger role.
Right.
But in my area of expertise is not as important. I think it's more having the degree per se and having the experience is what mattered the most. So I'm happy that worked out that way.
Got it. That makes sense. That's super helpful to know. So you were in Florida for a while, and then from Florida, did you eventually come straight to Jersey, or did you move elsewhere within the country before you came up here?
Straight to Jersey, to Joycey. Okay. Yeah.
Got it. I assume, did you have a job relo you up here, or did you just find a job up here? Like what made you decide that Florida wasn't right for you and you wanted to go to the Northeast?
Well, those who love Florida will not agree with me, but I think Florida is a great place to vacation, right? Or to, I don't know if retiring or something, but as it relates to someone who has young children and things like that, it's hard because there are like a few companies in my field, right? There were like 5 companies total in South Florida and even some central, right? So 5 big companies. So I was open to, moving to a different state that had more opportunities, which was the case for Jersey. This company relocated me to Jersey, so that was great.
Were you in the same field as now, consumer healthcare or healthcare of some kind, or were you in a different industry at that point?
No, I was consumer. I did category management and almost like a business intelligence / consumer insights department that we built from ground up.
Okay.
So I have been always in that adjacent field of like people understanding and
of course
which I love.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I mean, for myself, and again, like I said, I've worked my entire life ever since I got my first job at a baseball card shop or Burger King or whatever else, all in New Jersey. So I've never left the state for a job or whatever. But I've done so many different types of jobs, right? Without naming companies, like I've worked in market research, I worked in sales, I've worked in supply chain, I've worked in marketing, I've worked in sales ops. I've done lots of different things. So for me, I completely get it. You know, for me, the category was less important than the actual role. Like I've worked in light bulbs, I've worked in candy,
Exactly.
I've worked in cereal. At the end of the day, I mean, as long as you understand the basic concepts, like we all sell in similar ways. Dynamics might be a little different category by category, but for the most part, it's a very similar role.
I agree. I mean, I think when I said 5 corporations, it's more, the industries were, tourism or banking. So less consumer packaged goods, which is where I have spent most of my time. But I'm happy to, report that, I've been blessed to being part of different industries and different, from, personal care products, condoms, food, like margarine, like acne medication, cold and flu. So it's fun to have exposure to different categories, but always around the same kind of area. But you're right, it's easier when you have that breadth that you have done a bunch of things. But if the whole side note there would be, if you are coming from a different country, that is extremely difficult. That's the other thing that I found when I moved here. Back in my country, in Venezuela, we used to have that flexibility of switching to different types of jobs, right? As you're saying. You could be marketing, in sales, in financing, whatever the heck you wanted to do, you could. But then I come here and they're like, oh, you don't have enough experience in this little niche of this little niche of this little niche. So that for me was a big difference between the two cultures, the corporate culture. Is like, why? So that was another factor that complicated finding my first job.
So just to add to that, I would say, like, for me, there's a couple of things. So I would say coming in from the outside, I would say absolutely. So like when I get hired by a company, if I didn't have that specific expertise, they're not going to put me into that kind of a role. Internally, like I've found over the last, like, let's say 5 or 6 years, and maybe specifically the company we work at right now, I've had a lot of luck in terms of getting opportunities, let's say, in different types of things. Like, hey, I want to learn supply chain, I want to do this, and kind of jumping around a little bit, which is great. I mean, maybe it's, this one company, maybe overall corporate culture is changing, which I definitely would say. I mean, corporate culture now versus back in 2000, 2001 is very different. Like there's a lot more cutthroat back then. I think it's a little more trying to help everybody out, trying to win together as a team. It just feels like we've evolved to a better place, I think, which I'm super happy about. And I'm really excited to see, like, when my daughters eventually, if they go into this industry or something else, like what they live through. Like, again, another example, years ago when Robin, my older daughter, was born, I basically, I had vacation time and I could take sick time, but like basically within a week of her being born, I was back at work. Versus now the company we work at, which for anybody who wants information on it, go check on my LinkedIn or at jeffseltzer.com where we work. They give you 6 months paid paternity or maternity time, whether it's adopted, whether you're father or mother or whatever it is like that. They completely pay you for 6 months, which is insane. Like I love that for new parents nowadays. Am I jealous that I didn't get that 16 years ago? Absolutely. But I love the fact that it's offered now and that the industry as a whole is evolving and offering this because, as an employee and as a new parent, it's just very, very difficult. But
it really is. Yeah. I mean, now that you're saying that, it brings back memories of, I love that benefit. I really do. And I'm like, why didn't we have that? But now, keeping it 100% real with myself. Back then, I remember wanting to be with my baby 100% of the time. And I'm like, I wish I had more time with you. And then by month number 3, I was like, I really need adult time.
But think about it then. Like if you had, and not saying that you should have a kid now because I'm done. The kitchen's closed at this point. But think about it, right? So like you have the option, right? So if you were to have a kid right now, if you're paid for 6 months, you can put the kid in daycare at month 2 if you want. And you can spend 4 months doing whatever it is that you want. Get me time, half the kid, whatever you want to do. Versus back then, it wasn't even an option, right? So I love the fact that like that is a thing now. And again, like
you have flexibility to decide what you want to do. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, like just society as a whole evolving, I think is great. The fact that like more people get rights, the fact that companies are offering more rights like this, offering more benefits like this, I just think it's going to get better and better. And again, I'm hopeful that like when my kids are older, your kids are older, that gets even better and becomes more of a employee friendly company, because it only makes you want to work that much harder for that company, right? It just
That
makes
is
you a
very true.
happier employee. So
Yeah. And that you can be yourself, right? Because that is super special for someone like me. I have two neurodivergent, as my daughter educates me. It's not neurodiverse, mom. It's neurodivergent. Okay, fine.
right,
And now that I see the traits that she has, I'm like, oh, yo, I have ADHD myself, but I never got diagnosed, right?
yeah,
So if you add on top of that the fact that I come from a different culture where, there are certain traits that define me as a Venezuelan, as a Latina, right? Like, the whole, well, what you see is what you get type thing, obviously within the constraints of respect for the human being, right? But it's important to me to be surrounded by an environment where I can be myself, whether it's church, whether it is my company, my home, my relationships. And that's important because there have been points in my life where I have not been comfortable to be myself.
right.
So that's super critical for me. So that's another thing that I've seen evolving as time goes by versus 20, 30 years ago.
Oh, completely agreed. I mean, I've never been diagnosed with anything, but I mean, I'm for the most part an introvert. I'm a data geek, so I mean, you could probably stereotype me based on those types of things of what my personality is probably like, and
Mhm.
it's part of like what kind of led me to this podcast, the fact that I'm trying to kind of like evolve and grow myself and try different things. So for
Yeah.
me, this is kind of my outlet. But again, I definitely did have a tough couple of years right out of college into my first full time job, just trying to find myself, feel what's like professionally appropriate. Because you go basically from high school and college where my jobs, I worked in a drugstore, I worked in a restaurant, and all of a sudden you're sitting in an office 9 hours a day, and like the
Yeah.
mentality has to be very different. But it doesn't take much to kind of commit political end game basically or whatever, and doing something
Exactly.
stupid, and all of a sudden you're not promotable, I guess you could say. versus
Exactly.
versus nowadays, I would say, to your point, like you could be more your, and again, it's going to vary company by company, I completely get that, but you can be more your authentic self, and then people are like, okay, that's just the way that that person is. They're really good at their job, but they're a little eccentric or a little different or whatever,
Yes.
which I think is just fine. I mean, we're all different, but like the less we have to kind of play a part or play a character at work, I think the better we can be, and basically, just work better together. You know what I mean?
100%. The first time I was a manager back in Venezuela, precisely, I had a boss who, he was a great mentor. But it's funny because when I got promoted, he says, "Hey, Litthya, here is the deal. I know you like to make your jokes, your dad jokes, and whatever, whatever. You're gonna be a manager now. You have to stop doing that, okay? You're not." I clearly did not listen. But that's the way things would work in the past, right? Like, no, you just can't make jokes. Why? You know?
Yeah, which for me, I mean, I've been told that basically my entire career, even my entire life, right? I like say less is more is what I was told years ago. For me,
Yeah.
it's just tough sometimes. Like sometimes, like you're looking at it, you're like, I have to make a comment, I have to make a comment, and it almost like hurts to not make that comment. So it causes anxiety and whatever else like that. So obviously for me, I've tried to evolve and try to grow, especially as I've gotten older. But at the same time, I'm still the same dopey kind of like funny guy sometimes, whatever. So it just comes
Exactly.
out. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so you moved from Florida to New Jersey, and you worked for a couple of different companies up here. Um, so after immigrating, doing all that kind of stuff. So obviously, your daughter is now you have a daughter in high school and a daughter in middle school. Um,
Yes.
so
Yay.
they obviously recognize that you're not native to the United States. Both of them were born in this country. Like, what
Yes.
is their view? Like, what's their perspective? Like, are they curious? Do they not really care? Like, what is their mindset of like, oh, mom's from somewhere else, but I'm not? Do they want to go check it out? Kind of like, what's their thought?
It's so interesting that you asked that question because you're going to have, obviously, your kids are from, part of your DNA, part of your genetics,
Of course.
and the combination with someone else, they do share the same father and everything. And it's interesting how different they are in that sense. So, my oldest daughter, she would love the Latin American food. She would ask about how is life in Latam, right? And she is interested in my childhood and my family, and why haven't you introduced me to this aunt? She's still alive, so why haven't I had a conversation with her? Things like that. She even has a Venezuelan flag in her room.
Okay.
All right. So it's like heartwarming to see that. My youngest daughter, she's more, how agencies would say acculturated. I think she's more American in that sense, right? Like she, to your point earlier, she knows her mom is from a different country. She enjoys an arepa because who wouldn't? And but that would be the extent of it, right? Like when it gets too deep in my culture, she would, take her distance. It's YouTube shorts and things like that. That's culture right now. Everything outside YouTube shorts and Mr. Beast and all those celebrities is I'm not interested type thing. But
Gotcha.
I'm hoping that when she grows up, there'll be more interest in my culture. Especially now I'm trying to tell them what's going on. Today this happened, especially because I'm trying to foster a sense of thankfulness in them that we have it really, really easy in this country. And we can make comments and complain all day, but we do have the ability to eat and have a roof over our heads and things like that. So sometimes we don't realize what we have because we complain too much about what we don't have,
Sure.
So
No, absolutely. I mean, it's a great call out, right? So you have two different daughters. Obviously, both live together. Both of them are your kid. Both have different mindsets, but again, neither of them grew up in Venezuela, so they all each process it differently, right? So
exactly.
one of them, is like, hey, I'd like to know more about it, and the other one, who is younger, maybe as she gets older, to your point, she'll show a little more interest or be more intrigued by it. So I mean, we all develop in different ways. We all evolve in different ways. It's just what it is, right?
Exactly. And it's also who you surround yourself with, because my oldest daughter, she has a number of friends that are Latinos as well.
Right.
So I think the more, at school or in activities, when you start having those relationships with people that speak the language, then you're more interested. I cannot be left out. Maybe they're talking about me. I don't know. So that's probably one bad incentive, but hey, incentive nonetheless to learn the language.
Absolutely. And it'll be interesting too, because your older daughter's in high school. I don't necessarily know how Hispanic or Latino the high school that she goes to is, but when she goes to college, generally you have a more diverse set of people. So if she ends up leaning towards that kind of a friend group or whatever else like that, I mean, it could go in any direction, right?
Yes, it can. And there's also the blurry lines. Once you're second generation, like meaning your parents moved here,
yes,
you were born here.
So she would be first generation United States because you were not born here.
Correct. So when that happens, there's all this, mix of cultures that you don't know where one thing ends and the other begins. So I love seeing this new generation and the friends that they have, because they are from totally different backgrounds and ethnicities. And I love seeing that.
Absolutely. A couple more questions for you before we eventually, end the pod for the day. And this is just more of a geeky question that I would ask. Nobody else probably would. So obviously you were grown up and you were you were an adult, I guess, when you moved to this country. From a taxes and a money situation, I don't want to get you arrested, although I guess the statute's probably up if there is anything. How does that work? Because I've heard or I've read when people leave the U.S. to go to other countries, there's tax things in terms of having to sell off assets and whatever else like that. Did you have any issues with that, or basically whatever you had you took over with you and kind of was what it was?
Oh my goodness gracious! So thankfully, taxes are not the same everywhere, meaning the tax laws are not as strict in other countries. Mind you, I left my home then which I finally ended up selling, but I paid some taxes on it, but the amount that you pay is this big. For those that are listening, I'm using my two fingers. It's really tiny.
So there wasn't a lot. So when you sold, I guess, when you had a profit down in Venezuela, there wasn't a lot of taxes or conversion fees or whatever coming over to this country.
No, it's not that complicated. It's a very small amount, which, by the way, I paid the whole thing when I sold the apartment, right?
Sure.
So it was like a 5-year tax, but it was nothing. It was really nothing. So very different situation when you move to the U.S. versus when
Right.
you move out of the U.S. Completely
Yep.
different.
Got it. Got it. Last question I had. So you've been in the United States now for what, almost 20 years at this point. I guess 19
Yeah.
years if you're keeping me honest with the math here. Is
Mhm.
there anywhere else in anywhere else in the world that you'd want to move to? Right. So at this point, you've been in this country for, I'm going to be generous here. Let's say for half your life. You're in Venezuela for like half your life,
I
give or
want
take.
to be generous.
Give or take.
How elegant.
Have you ever sat down and said, "Hey, I'd love to move to Canada, or I'd love to move to Japan or England," or you're kind of like, you know what, this is where I want to, eventually retire and kind of call it a day in this country?
Yeah. It's interesting. There's different places that have crossed my mind, right? Mexico is one of them, only because my family lives there. My immediate family all moved to Mexico. So I miss them. I see them once or twice in 3D per year. Um, that would be the thing that would tie me to Mexico, like being closer to them physically. There's, my younger daughter, she's obsessed with England,
Okay.
obsessed. And I don't, maybe there's a future where I would move there for a while. I really don't know. I think, where my heart is, where my kids are. Well, now I don't know, because now that my oldest is going into college, she's gonna have her own journey, right?
Of course.
Um, so I think I have that flexibility now that I didn't have, before, of saying, hey, if we find something, if we like what we see in a different country, we're open to doing it. But I haven't thought about that as much,
Got it.
you know.
Yep. Awesome.
But I think that comes with
That's okay. Go ahead.
with the territory of the amount of moves that I've experienced in my lifetime. I was keeping track until I stopped. Probably like 20 times in the last 10 years, something stupid like that.
Wow.
So last 15, I don't
Oof.
even know. The point is I've moved a lot
That's a
from
lot. Yeah.
country to country. I lived in Ecuador for a little bit. I lived in Colombia for a little bit. So I have moved a lot. So I think it helps you, number one, with resilience. It helps you kind of adapt easily, versus I know how hard it is for someone that has been in the same town since they were little, same friends, same everything.
Yep.
For their entire lives. So it makes you resilient to experience different cultures, different homes, etc. And it helps you understand that your roots are not really in a house or in a town. Your roots are really in the people, in the relationships, right? So
Yep.
that's why I'm not 100% bound to this home, for example, right? So
Yeah. That's. I
do I
mean,
want
so.
to go there? No.
So good for you. That's crazy though. I'm thinking about it. Like I've moved, I don't know, a bunch of times across North and South Jersey or whatever. But like for me, I hate packing. I hate unpacking. I hate putting stuff
Mhm.
back on the wall. Like for me, like we've been in this house now since 2005. So basically, since you moved to this country, we've lived in this town and specifically in this house. The thought of packing and unpacking, hanging things up, taking things down, stuff like that, like it
Yes.
just, the anxiety that I get thinking about it, because it's just so much work. And then moving somewhere else, living out of a box, and then unpacking and stuff like that. I don't know. Like I figure I'll probably move once, maybe twice more again in my life before I die, hopefully, and that'll be it. But I guess we'll see how it all rolls out. It is what it is, right?
Exactly. But I'm with you there. It's annoying.
It is, and
Moving is
especially
annoying.
having kids now. It's not just your stuff you got to pack up; it's your kids' stuff and help them unpack and all that kind of stuff like that. So
Exactly.
definitely is a bit of a burden, I would imagine.
Well, they're old enough that they can pack their own stuff.
Well, so they can pack their own stuff, but would they? And would they
Will
pack
they?
it well enough that it's not going to break in the box and all that kind of stuff, or
Oh,
lose
yeah.
things or whatever, right? They're just going to throw
Yeah,
everything in one box and hope for the best, probably, right?
exactly. Well, they're experts at this point.
Obviously.
But yeah, my oldest does not want to move again, and understandably, she's been part of most of my moves, right? So
Right.
I totally get it. So yeah, but I don't know what the future holds, but I know who holds the future, so I trust that everything will be fine.
There you go. Awesome. On that note, anything that you'd like to promote or support or plug before we finish for the day?
Oh, amazing. So yeah, of course, follow the news, the Venezuela news. My people are fighting for their freedom. It's heartbreaking. But I think if we can call our representatives and, ask for support, basically, to get out of that horrible, horrible, horrible situation that is affecting not only my country, but the entire region and the world, because the immigrants are completely out of control. I have heard it's the second largest migration after Syria. So it is that bad. And secondly, I support a cause that I love. It's called Operation Christmas Child. We pack shoe boxes for kids around the world. Anything that fits in a shoebox, right? Like a little toy, a little toiletry, or whatever. So if you're interested in hearing more, through Jeff, I'll give you all the information that you need, because I think it's a beautiful cause, and it also helps if you are trying to find things to do with your kids so that they understand, how good they have it, and they can kind of share a little bit of themselves with other people. That's a cause that I support and I have been supporting for the last 15 years. 15.
Awesome. Well, thank you. 1-5. It's 1-5 years. That's 5 times 3.
Exactly.
Got it. Well, Litthya, thank you again so much for joining. And for all of you that are listening on this podcast, thank you again for joining. If this is your first time listening, we do have a bunch of other older episodes which I think are really, really awesome. We have an episode on Disney World, celebrity autograph collecting. We have one about my trip with two of my buddies to Philadelphia for WrestleMania week. Lots of really cool stories, some others as well.
Nice.
We have a lot of other guests coming up over the next few weeks as well, including in a few weeks, I'm going off to Halloween Horror Nights down in Orlando, Florida. So me and my buddy, after we get back, we'll be talking about that, probably some other really cool stuff too. As a reminder, we are on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Amazon, CastBox, Good Pods, which I've been told pulls from Apple, so I guess Good Pods just kind of works as it's supposed to. On Instagram, you can follow us at Everybody Has a Story Pod. Once again, DMs are open, so if you want to be a guest or just a shout out, or want to tell me I'm wrong about something, feel free to send me a DM.
Very likely.
Very likely. I mean, I'm wrong more times than I'm right, I guess. But the way I look at it is, right, a great baseball player hits what, 315, 320, which means they're right 32% of the time. Like,
that is very true.
Imagine being a millionaire and missing 70% of the time. It's fantastic. Like, that's what I strive for in life, right? I mean, it is what it is. Personal Instagram over at Seltzer77. Once again, for all things Jeff Seltzer, you can check me out at jeffseltzer.com. You can check me out and stay up to date on some of our old and newer ridiculous moments. Email everybodyhasastorypod@gmail.com. Outside of that, thank you all for joining once again. See you next week. Make sure again to follow, comment, auto download, all that fun stuff, because I've been told it helps the algorithms. Anyhow, have a great week, everyone, and I will talk next week. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye. Thank